Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about breaking free, specifically from addiction.
Always a tough one.
You got that right. But we've got a great source to help us unpack this. We're diving into Renacer desde Caos,
which means
Reborn from Chaos. It's by Ricardo Romero Ardila.
Okay, catchy title. So what's the deal with this Romero guy?
Oh, he's got some serious street cred. He's been sober for 28 years and working with Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 7.
Wow, so he's walked the walk.
He definitely has. And in this book, he ties his recovery to his Christian faith.
Interesting. So it's like a 2-for-1 deal, tackling addiction and faith.
Exactly. He sees them as totally intertwined. But, before even getting into Romero's story, I was blown away by just how widespread addiction is.
Oh, absolutely. It's a global epidemic, really.
Seriously. Millions of lives affected. And it's not just the addicts themselves. It's their families, friends, everyone around them. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And it's so easy to get caught up in just the physical aspects, the health consequences.
Right. But Romero, he kind of flips the script on that.
Yeah.
He calls addiction a spiritual struggle.
Which makes you think, right? Because there's definitely a moral component to it, at least for some people.
Right.
Like that whole idea of seeking comfort in things that ultimately hurt you.
Exactly. And he actually backs it up with examples from the Bible. Talks about self-control, temptation. It's like this age-old struggle.
It's that pull between good and bad, light and darkness.
Yeah. And Romero's been to that dark place. He's really open about his own journey, how he found solace and strength in Jesus Christ.
And that faith helped him rebuild his life.
Totally. He basically says that no matter how far gone you think you are, renewal is always possible.
Powerful stuff. So is that what led him to Alcoholics Anonymous, that search for renewal?
Yeah, in a way. It's like his personal transformation became the foundation for how he approaches the 12 steps.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because AA itself isn't necessarily a religious program.
Right. It's spiritual, but not religious.
Exactly. But Romero finds these parallels between the steps and his Christian beliefs.
Like what? Can you give me an example?
Well, think about it. Self-reflection, asking for forgiveness, making amends.
Yeah, those are all key parts of the 12 steps.
And they also resonate with Christian teachings about humility, repentance, and reconciliation.
Wow. Never thought about it like that. It's like that saying, let go and let God, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's about surrendering to something bigger than yourself. And this is where Romero takes it a step further. He believes the 12 steps can apply to way more than just alcohol.
Really? Like what?
I mean, he pretty much says anything you can be addicted to. We're talking drugs, obviously, but also gambling, work, even relationships.
Relationships. How can you be addicted to a relationship?
It's not about the relationship itself, but about that need for validation, for someone else to complete you. It's like those things become substitutes for genuine connection.
Okay, I see what you mean. So, like, how do you actually use the 12 steps for all that? Where do you even begin?
Well, he always starts at the foundation, step 1. Admitting powerlessness.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, tell me about it. But Romero doesn't sugarcoat it. He asks these really tough questions in the book.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like, have you ever tried to control your addiction only to find yourself right back where you started? It's about getting real with yourself, acknowledging that you haven't been able to solve this on your own.
Ouch. That's got to be tough to swallow.
It is. But he argues that you can't really move forward until you admit you need help.
So true. You can't fix something if you don't acknowledge it's broken.
Exactly. And that leads right into step 2, which is all about embracing a power greater than ourselves.
Okay, a power greater than ourselves. I got to be honest, that phrase always kind of throws me. It's kind of vague,
Yeah, I get it. It can definitely feel a little fuzzy at first. Like, who or what are we talking about here? God, the universe, not my grandmother.
Right. It's like, who am I supposed to be surrendering to?
Well, the good news is Romero tackles that head on. He actually shares his own experience, how for him, that higher power is Jesus Christ.
Makes sense, given his faith.
Totally. But he's also very clear that it doesn't have to be the same for everyone.
Okay, so it's more about finding what works for you, that source of strength that you can tap into, whatever that looks like.
You got it. He even talks about how some people in AA find their higher power in the group itself, that sense of community and shared purpose. The point is, it's got to be something outside of yourself, something bigger than your own willpower.
Because let's face it, willpower alone rarely cuts it.
Right.
Speaking of which, where do emotions fit into all of this? Because I know Romero talks a lot about understanding and managing your feelings.
He does.
Yeah.
Because they're a huge part of the puzzle. See, Romero's argument is that people often turn to their addictions to cope with uncomfortable emotions.
Okay, that makes sense. Like when you're stressed, anxious, lonely,
Yeah.
you reach for that drink, that cigarette, that whatever your vice is to numb it all out.
Exactly. So a big part of recovery, he says, is learning how to actually deal with those emotions in a healthy way.
Easier said than done, right? I mean, feelings are messy. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling, let alone how to handle it.
Right. Well, Romero uses this tool called a table of emotions. It's kind of his thing.
A table of emotions. Like, what is that? A literal table?
Yeah, pretty much. He lists out all these different emotions, from the obvious ones like joy, sadness, anger, fear, to more, I don't know, subtle ones like serenity, anticipation.
Okay. Yeah.
And next to each emotion, he puts its opposite.
So, like, joy is the opposite of sadness, right?
Exactly, but then he gets kind of deep with it. Like, he says the opposite of joy isn't just sadness, it can also be boredom.
Huh. Never thought of it like that.
Right. Or the opposite of fear isn't just courage, it can be recklessness.
Okay, so it's about recognizing those nuances in how you're feeling.
Yes, and realizing how those feelings can actually drive your behavior. Because if you're not aware of what you're feeling, you're going to be ruled by it, right? Like a puppet on a string.
Totally. Your emotions end up calling the shots.
Exactly. But if you can learn to identify those emotions, figure out why you're feeling them, then you can start making conscious choices about how you respond.
So it's like, instead of letting your emotions steer you into the rocks, you're taking back control of the ship.
Exactly. And another big part of this self-awareness thing is something Romero calls writing your story.
Wait, like writing an autobiography?
Pretty much. He says it's crucial for step one, admitting powerlessness. And he even gives you a framework for writing it.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
So he says to focus on 4 main areas. When your addiction started, any attempts you made to control it, the consequences you faced, and like the emotional roller coaster it's taken you on.
Intense.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see how that would be helpful. It's like connecting the dots, right? Seeing the progression, the patterns of your addiction.
Exactly. It's about facing those hard truths, seeing the impact your choices have had, and understanding how you even got to this point.
And you're not just thinking about it, you're putting it down on paper.
Which Romero says is super powerful. It's about bringing it into the light, you know? And this is where he starts to go a little deeper into what he calls the deeper waters of the program.
Deeper waters. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What's down there?
Well, he introduces this whole concept called levels of consciousness, which he got from the work of David R. Hawkins.
Levels of consciousness. Okay, gotta admit, that sounds a little out there, even for me. So break it down for me. What are we talking about here? Okay, levels of consciousness. It's a whole new world, right?
It really is. So imagine like a ladder, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Each rung on this ladder represents a different level of consciousness. And it starts way down at the bottom with like shame, guilt, all those heavy negative emotions.
So if you're on that bottom rung, you're not in a good place.
Not at all. But as you climb the ladder, you move through different levels. Fear, desire, pride, courage. Each rung is a shift in how you're feeling, how you see the world.
So the higher you climb, the better you feel.
Exactly. And at the very top, you've got enlightenment, peace, pure joy. That's the goal. And Romero's point is that where you are in that ladder, your level of consciousness, it directly affects everything, your choices, your behavior, even your addictions.
So someone struggling with addiction, they're probably stuck on one of those lower rungs.
Often, yeah. Think about it. Addiction thrives on shame, guilt, fear. It keeps you trapped in those low-frequency emotions, making it way harder to break free.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're saying that by raising your consciousness, by climbing that ladder, you can actually overcome addiction.
That's the idea. And Romero talks about how things like meditation, practicing gratitude, forgiveness, even just helping others, those things can help you climb to a higher level.
It's like rewiring your brain to operate from a higher frequency.
Exactly. You're shifting your entire energy.
Okay, so we've got the 12 steps, we've got levels of consciousness, and just when I thought I was getting a handle on things, Romero throws in another curveball, the Enneagram.
Ah, yes, the Enneagram. Have you ever looked into that?
A little bit. It's like another personality typing system, right?
It is, but it goes deeper than just putting you in a box. It's more about understanding your core motivations, your fears, your patterns.
Okay, so how does that tie into addiction and recovery?
Well, Romero says that by knowing your Enneagram type, you can start to see your own personal pitfalls when it comes to addiction.
So like certain types are more susceptible to certain things.
Right. Some types are prone to anxiety, Others are people pleasers. Some are super driven. Others avoid conflict at all costs. It's about recognizing those tendencies in yourself.
So it's like, hey, this is where you might stumble, so watch out for it.
Exactly. Forewarned is forearmed, right?
Totally. But it can feel overwhelming with all these different tools and techniques out there. 12 steps, levels of consciousness, the Enneagram. It's like, where do you even begin?
It's true. There's no shortage of information out there.
And not all of it is good information, right?
Sadly, no. Romero actually cautions against that. He says it's important to be really discerning, especially with all these, self-help programs popping up left and right.
So it's about finding what resonates with you, what feels right.
Exactly. And steering clear of anything that feels too good to be true, because it probably is.
So true. You have to trust your gut. But with all that said, there's still a lot of hope here. I mean, Romero's own story is proof that people can change, that recovery is possible.
Oh, absolutely. It's about the journey, not about being perfect.
And he doesn't make any promises.
Yes.
Right? He's not saying it's going to be easy.
Not at all. He actually wraps up the book by highlighting the 12 promises of the 12-step program. Those possibilities that come with working the steps.
Yeah. Like finding a new sense of freedom, having deeper relationships, even experiencing a spiritual awakening. Powerful stuff.
Right. And he emphasizes that these promises aren't guarantees. They only come through commitment, doing the work, staying open to change.
So it's not just about breaking free from addiction. It's about creating a whole new life, a life filled with joy, purpose, connection.
Exactly. It's a complete transformation.
And for anyone listening who's feeling a little lost, Romero leaves us with a powerful question. If you could choose one area of your life to focus on, for growth, for self-awareness, what would it be?
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Right. It doesn't have to be everything at once. Just one thing, one area where you're ready to dig deep.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. There's support out there, people who understand, resources to help you along the way.
This has been an incredible conversation, really insightful. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening, remember, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep diving deep.